All right, so today is going to be all about the results and the discussion. We're going to break apart into breakout rooms, so hopefully you get about 30 minutes to work on running the main results of running the main stats of your project. Uh, so before we get into assignment number 12, which will be new next week, excuse me, I just want to mention that assignment number 7 revisions are due soon. I think technically they're supposed to be due by like now or by the end of the day. I'm gonna let you have until Friday at midnight to submit it. So submit it by Friday at midnight. I'll give you an extra day to do it. But yeah, so you have a chance to get up to 3 extra points if you address the feedback that I gave you on the assignment number 7, which was the intro. Um, I suggest you do it, even if you don't care about the points, just because it allows me to look at your intro one more time and provide you any extra feedback. So that way you can get an even better grade on the final. Does anyone have any questions about assignment number 7 or the revisions for assignment number 7?
Yes, I was wondering if you wanted us to highlight what we change or
Um, I mean, you don't have to, but if you did, I would make my life a lot easier. You don't have to, but if you would like to, I would appreciate that. Thank you. But once again, if you don't have to if you don't want to, um, but if you do, that would make my life a little bit easier. I think you can also upload it to either eCampus or email it to me. Um, or you can do both. It just one or the other is fine, or you can do both. I'd prefer if you emailed it to me, but upload it to eCampus if you want. I think there's a slot open for it. But don't worry about like lateness or anything like that. Just make sure it's in by Friday at midnight. Okay, so assignment number 12 is going to be all about writing the results and discussion draft. Um, Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about today what goes in the results. You should already have a good idea of what goes in the results, but we're also going to talk about what makes up the discussion and hopefully work through some of that. It's worth 25 points. More details are in eCampus. I'm going to pull up the actual assignment because I just want to show you. Um, Yep. So this is the actual assignment. Once again, I've said this, kind of hinted at it before. I know this is a lot of instructions, but really do make sure that you go through it and you read them very carefully because Dr. Tenenholtz does a great job at providing really good details in the instructions. So we tell you exactly, what should make up your results, and we tell you, what goes in your discussion. Now, also, use this PowerPoint where we're going to talk more about the discussion. Use the sample papers on eCampus to see how you should structure some things and give you some ideas potentially for some limitations or how you should structure the connecting to previous literature section. Use those sample papers. They are very valuable. I'm going to reference them a few times throughout the discussion section. But make sure you really are reading a lot of or reading all of the instructions in your assignments because people are missing out on a lot of points that they shouldn't be missing out on because it clearly states in the instructions. Also, make sure you have an APA style title page. If there are assignments where you don't need an APA style title page, please make sure you're putting your name on assignments. People are losing like automatically -2 points because they don't put their names on assignments. Please do it. It makes my life a lot easier because then I don't have to go back through eCampus and figure out whose assignment is whose. So please make sure you're putting your names on assignments. All right, so this is assignment number 12. It is due next Thursday, just a draft of the results and discussion. Hopefully the results section should be really easy as we're gonna walk through it today, but the discussion's a little bit harder, but it's manageable. Any questions about assignment number 12? Okay, results. So can someone just tell me right off the bat, what's the point of the results section?
To show your data.
Yep, just very simply, you just want to show your results. You just want to show the data. And So yeah, so the purpose, present the findings of your study. So, descriptive statistics, what did you find? Inferential statistics, were the results statistically significant? I don't like the little breakdown here or the descriptions of them. I think they're slightly a little bit confusing. So the way I like to remember descriptive statistics are, they just describe a variable. So you're not looking at the relationship between two variables. You just want to describe a variable. And in what ways, I asked this last week, so I'm not going to ask it again, but in what ways do we describe our variables? Well, mean and standard deviation, right? For the numerical variables like age, maybe, if you're just going to look at what is the average score on your post test, or what is the average score on your dependent variable? Well, we can give the mean and standard deviation of that for each group. We're not looking at the differences between them, but we can just report them, stuff like that. Inferential statistics. Well, this is when we look at maybe correlations, or how are two variables related, or in the case of this, your experiment and your project this semester, we're looking at t-tests, or we're looking at comparing two groups. So this is, inferential. We're going to have a paragraph on this. We may have a paragraph on descriptive statistics, and then we're also going to have a paragraph on inferential statistics. But we'll get into that in a second. Do not explain. So there is no, in the results section, you don't try to explain why you found what you found. The results section is just purely, here's the math, and here's like an English translation of what we found. Remember, we're not saying, well, we think we found that there is a difference because of X, Y, and Z. No, we don't do that here. That goes into discussion. This is just pure math, here's what we found. So what encompasses the results section? Well, maybe you're going to report relevant descriptive statistics, means and standard deviations on your outcome. So this is a little bit tricky, because if you're doing a change, some groups are doing change scores where we looked at pre-test and we looked at post-test. And then we calculated a change score, and that is what you're running your t-test on. Well, you can report on descriptive statistics, so the mean and standard deviations, for just the post-test score. Remember, we're not comparing groups. We're just saying, hey, group one had an average score of, 12, with a standard deviation of 5. On the post-test score, this other group had a mean and standard deviation of this on the post-test score. We're not comparing them, right? We're just saying, hey, here's what our post-test scores are. You're also going to want to put in context, well, what does a higher score represent on this scale? You should have done something similar you should have done, what am I trying to say? Oh, in your methods, where you talk about the scale that you used. Potentially, if you use a scale, or if you created your own, you should probably somewhere in your methods say, hey, a higher score in this scale represents more positive emotions. Well, you want to do the same thing here when you're reporting, oh, participants in the music condition scored a 5, participants in a non-music condition scored an average of 6. A higher score in a scale represents more positive emotions. Perhaps you also want to do a graph on this, like a simple bar graph, where you just graph the, the x-axis would just be your post-test score, and your y-axis would be your two groups. So that's just descriptive statistics. Now, if you're not doing a change score, like let's say your outcome variable is just, you measured it once, right? You didn't do a pre-test, post-test, you just measured it once. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's some groups that did, here's an example. The group who did race and housing prices. You only asked the housing price once. So you wouldn't really need a descriptive statistic on the average housing price for both groups, because you're going to report on the average housing price for each group in the inferential statistics, where you talk about your hypothesis test. So really the descriptives, and maybe you can find some other things to look at descriptives, but don't use a descriptive on your main outcome, because you're just going to report it again anyways in your inferential statistics. And I could talk more individually with each group about what would be the best case scenario for them and how they should structure their results. But Well, what else should we see in your results? We should see your hypothesis test, right? The meat and bones, the main part of your study. And we say the stats for your hypothesis test should be incorporated in and out sentences. It says here using sentences that capture the pattern of results. I'm going to show you what I mean in just a couple seconds, but you're basically going to be weaving in the inferential statistics. It says here, if significant, include effect size. Don't worry about including effect size if you don't want to. I'm not going to take any points off. If you want to include effect size and explain it, props to you. Maybe subconsciously I'll give you, I'll be a little bit more lenient, but don't worry about this effect size thing in here. I know some people don't have it on SPSS. Just don't worry about it. If you're testing more than one hypothesis, and I know several groups have multiple outcomes that they're looking at, which is perfect, which is really cool. Organize them by hypothesis. You organize the paragraphs by hypothesis, and I'll show you what I mean right now. And then, of course, always write in past tense. So this is what I want to show. How do you structure a results paragraph? So we've already talked about the descriptive paragraph. We're just reporting on mean and standard deviation. What does a high score represent on that particular variable? But how do we report like a t-test? Has Dr. Tenenholtz gone over how to report a t-test and how to do it? And where to find the information? Any thumbs up if she did?
Is it different from last semester?
Did you do t-test last semester?
If it's yeah, we did t-test last semester. If it's the same thing, then yeah, she has one over it.
Yeah, so t-test, it's the same thing from last semester, but I'm going to provide a really good website for you. I'm going to put it in the chat, and I'll also put it in my email that I'm going to send. All right, I put a website in the chat, and I also put it in the email, but so it's one page. I think it's like the first thing if you type in how to do an APA style like t-test, how to report it. But anyways, I really care about the last paragraph at the end, but I kind of want to walk through it very fast. But essentially what they're doing is they have SPSS output from a t-test, and they're putting it in the sentences. So at the very end, we have, what our final paragraph should look like. But the remainder of the page above it explains where they pulled that information out from the t-test. So this is a really good refresher if you aren't 100% sure, where do I find this information from the SPSS output? Look at this website and it will help you immensely. But I really want to highlight this paragraph, which is at the very end. So, they put everything together. I want to highlight this and basically say, I want you to copy and paste this paragraph into your results section, change out whatever you need to change out, and I'm going to go through that, but change out whatever you need to change out, and this is what your results paragraph for your inferential t-test statistics should look like. I know people love to get, I see it in your intro, I see it in your methods, people like to stray away from what is standard. And in academic writing, you want to try to make it as standard as possible. People report t-tests the same way across all studies. Maybe some slight wording choices, but for the most part, everything is this way that I have highlighted right here. So I highly suggest, please, please, please copy and paste this paragraph and just change out what you need to change out. And now let me go through it. So it looks like from this study, just very briefly, their dependent variable is comparing memory on some type of word, so memory for words, and a sugar condition and a no sugar condition. So think about your own group, what are your two conditions and what are your outcomes? All right, I'm going to walk through this. An independent samples t-test was conducted to compare memory for words, so their DV, so put in your DV here, in sugar and no sugar conditions. So put in your two conditions here and try to make them very succinct. Take a step back and look at what, and try to assess what are you actually looking at in your independent variable. Some groups looked at music and how that influenced emotions. So we have a music condition and a no music condition. We have a African-American house condition and a white condition. I'm blanking on some of the other group studies. We have a positive social media experience and a negative social media experience. So really step back and think about what your two groups are. Anyways, So we have a t-test that's conducted to compare the DV and our two different IV conditions. It turns out there was a significant difference for this particular study here. So if there wasn't a significant difference, you would just say there was not a significant difference, but let's pretend that you had a significant difference. There was a significant difference in the scores for this group, right? So you have your first level of your IV, then you put your mean and standard deviation, and the other group, mean and standard deviation. Now I should mention that the M and the SD here should be italicized. That's proper APA format. But anyways, so there was a significant difference in the scores for this group, and you provide the mean and standard deviation, and the scores for this group, mean and standard deviation. Now, the remainder part of the sentence, you need to report your t-test statistics. So we should have T, which also should be italicized, but we have T in parentheses, degrees of freedom equals your t-test statistic, comma, P equals, and your p-value. It's all you need to report right there. And now if you need a refresher on, where in the heck do I find this information? Well, let's just scroll up here and we can see that, it tells us exactly where that information can be found. And this is exactly what your output will look like for your t-test. So if some of you are doing a paired samples t-test, it will look slightly different and I can work with you on that. But for the majority of groups, this is what it will look like. Now pause, because groups in my first class had this problem. When you're looking at significance, and hold on, let me just even pull up. I'm going to pull up output, but output will look like this, but all of your output will have, where is it? Homeworks, 100, assignment 10. Okay, let me just go to this group. All right, as SPSS is opening, I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find significance, because you can see here, hey, there's a significance here, and there's a significance here. Which one do you use? Well, clearly use this one, but let me show you what output looks like. So this is just a random output from a class. And let me go to their t-test. All right, so right here's their t-test, and it doesn't really matter what their variable is, but here's their t-test. So this is what yours should look like as well. Don't use this Levene's test for equality of variance significance to determine your significance. Don't even look at these two values right here. Only look at this significant two-tailed. So I just wanted to put it out there. I'm saying it now. Don't look at this significance. Look at this significance. All right. I think most groups got that messed up in my last class. So just look at this significance. All right. Let's go back down to our paragraph. So we reported our test statistics, right? T, parentheses, degrees of freedom, t-test statistic, which is 2.89, p-value. Next up, we need to put it in plain English. So these results suggest that sugar does have an effect on memory. So, think about if it was significant for your own group, this suggests that our music, whatever you're studying, positive social media, whatever, has an effect on whatever you are actually studying. And then specifically, our results suggest that when humans consume sugar, their memory for words increases. So think about it in terms of your own study. What did you actually find? If you had to sum it up in a sentence that looks like this, what would you say? All right. So this is what an inferential statistic paragraph should look like in your results section. I don't want to see, do not stray from this. I'm just going to put it out there. Just keep it just like this. Now, let's say you're running multiple hypotheses, or you're running multiple tests, right? Let's say you want to look at a couple of the other questions you asked. Well, do the exact same thing, just have multiple paragraphs. So have like 2 or 3 or 4, however many you're doing, paragraphs that look just like this, but with whatever information that you're putting in and out for whatever test that you're running. All right, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about how to report a t-test, what it should look like, anything? All right, was this helpful? Give me a thumbs up or say like, yes, is this website helpful? Okay. Yeah, I highly recommend you use it, especially look through. It's not that long. Look through if you're really not sure how to find the information, look through it. It doesn't tell you how to run a t-test. It actually maybe it looks like it does. I mean, if you go to analyze data, it looks like it does tell you how to do it. But anyways, here's how to report the data. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to open up breakout rooms and allow you guys about, what time are we done? 3:45, right? Yeah, 3:45. I'm gonna have you work for 40 minutes on running your test stats. I'm going to pull everyone back out at 3:30, and then we're going to have about 15 minutes to run through the discussion. Yeah, so run your stats. Step one, don't pay attention to these. We've already done most of these. Your data is clean. Maybe last week you hopefully should have worked on some descriptive stats for your method section where you talk about your participants. Run some descriptive stats, for one of your variables, and we can talk about it in your groups. You might want to also do like a bar graph showing the different, with both of your conditions down below and your outcome on the x-axis. Then start running your inferential statistics. One thing I really recommend is you all run them separately. So like get in there, say, hey, let's run our t-test for our main variable, run it separately, don't do it together, and then come together and say, hey, what was our significance level? And if all your significant levels are the same, you know you did it right. If you have different significant levels, you know you've done them wrong. They should all be the same because you're using the same data set. So do them separately, then come together and compare. Maybe there's some, think about any other statistics that you're going to want to run. Did you run any manipulation checks? Maybe you want to, see if your manipulation actually worked. If you're not sure what you should do there, let me know, and we can talk about it. I should say though, since I won't have enough time to really spend like 10 minutes with a group. I think, with 6 groups, I have about 5 minutes to spend with each group. So if one of the things I may suggest is if you're really having a hard time with running a t-test or interpreting the results, please come see me during my office hours because I can't spend too much time with each group, throughout class. So I may just say, hey, see me at office hours, set up a time to meet with me, just because I can't spend too much time with each individual group today. One thing to think about, some groups may be done with this like in 5 minutes, because I'm telling you, running a t-test really is not that hard. It's like 5 clicks of a button on SPSS, and writing up a paragraph, maybe another minute or two. Think about your interpretation. Think about how you're going to incorporate your results into your discussion. How does your findings compare with what you found in your intro? Because this is what you're going to be writing about in your discussion. So start thinking about that. Yeah, don't waste your time. Start thinking about how you're going to incorporate your work into other work and how it all relates. All right, does anyone have any questions before I open up breakout rooms? Whether it's like we're not sure what we're supposed to be doing or any questions?
Is there like a step-by-step somewhere where like how to run a t-test?
I guarantee you one of the homework assignments has it. Whatever homework, I think, can someone confirm that in one of the previous homework assignments it tells you how to do a t-test?
I think it's assignment 5.
Yeah, I think it's assignment 5 as well. Yeah, I think it's assignment 5. It should have pictures on how to do it. I mean, honestly, also, if you go to that website and click on, well, I think it was like analyze data, I think it also gives you a step-by-step as well. It looks a little bit older, but it should, for the most part, be the same. Anyways, I'm going to open up breakout rooms. I'm going to jump in and out. Please don't leave. It's just don't leave. I'm going to pull everyone back out at 3:30, just so that way we can talk about the discussion. All right, so I opened them all up. Just join the room that corresponds with your group number.
Can you put me in my group, please?
Yeah, what group are you?
3.
I'm in 3 too. Can you put me in 3?
Who said that, Morgan?
Morgan.
I'm also in 3.
You say your name.
Jess.
Okay.
Can you put me in group 4, please? And it's Natalie.
Okay.
And then Maddie in group 4 also, please.
And Corey, I'm also in group 4.
Also, come see me if you're having trouble incorporating in your results section. All right, for the sake of time, I'm gonna have to move on to the discussion. Come see me. Any questions on your results, or if I didn't get a chance to compare results with you, please make sure we do that as well. Because I'd rather do it as a group or in our Zoom meetings than have to like take off points on your results section. It just be easier for the both of us. All right, overview of the discussion. So this should be review from last semester. We didn't have you do we had to just do a draft of the discussion so we can talk a little bit more about it today. But the focus of the discussion is really to interpret your results. We don't want to see any numbers in here, but we want to say, hey, here's what we found. You want to also explain how findings fit in the big picture of the research issue. And you want to explore, why do we care about what you found? Why should we care? Some big, bold words. This global organization should look really familiar. It's your discussion's kind of set up in the exact opposite way of your introduction. You start off with a paragraph where you specifically focus on your study, and you say, hey, we were looking at this. We hypothesized this. Our reports found that our hypothesis, our findings did not support our hypothesis, and there actually was no difference between our two groups, or our findings supported our hypothesis, and there was a difference between the two groups. Then your next paragraph or two should be about, hey, here's how, and we're going to get into this, but it really should be about like, here is how it connects to previous literature. So let me back up a second and say, here are the parts of the discussion. And you have your first paragraph, which should be a summary, where in plain English, you just say, here's what we found. And also, was your hypothesis supported or not? I also highly suggest you go look at the example papers on eCampus, because there are two, sample paper 1 and sample paper 2 are kind of wildly different in how they do things, but I am going to say they pretty much are both A papers when it comes to discussion. I believe sample paper number 2, like their connection to previous literature, I think is like 3/4 of a page, maybe half a page, while sample paper number 1 has like 3 pages, I think 2 or 3 pages of connection to previous literature. So, you don't have to write a lot, but you can if you want, but don't get too overwhelmed with the discussion. So you should have, your first paragraph should be a summary. Your second paragraph, a summary of the results. Your second paragraph should be, how does you connect to previous literature? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. Your next paragraph or set of paragraphs should be about limitations of the current study. We'll talk more about that in a coming slide. You should have a future directions where you talk about, what should we do now that we have this information? Maybe we should do another study, because your study brought up some more questions. And finally, you finish with a strong take-home message. Here's why we really care about these results. Maybe here's how they can be used. So let's dive deeper into what makes up the study. I'm going to try to do this very fast so we get out on time. And I should mention, any questions about what I'm talking about, come see me. I've already worked with someone for about 40 minutes when working with their discussion. I will gladly sit down and walk you through it individually. But anyway, so connections to previous literature. How do results fit in with previous research and theory? So if your results are as predicted, so if you did find a significant difference, I'm assuming I know all of your hypotheses say, hey, there should be a difference between our two groups. And let's say that's what you found. How do your results connect with other studies that looked at, in your intro? Remember, all of your work that you're citing in the discussion should be coming from your intro. Maybe if you find some more research, you can throw it in the discussion, but everything really should be coming from the intro. How does your work extend the knowledge found in others? Maybe other studies didn't do it in a way that you did. Maybe you used a unique vignette, or you used a unique manipulation that other people didn't do. So that's how your study extends others. And tell us why that's important. If your results contradict previous findings, explain where the differences are, and maybe come up with some reasons about why those differences are there. Maybe it's because you use a different way to manipulate things, and maybe it just wasn't impactful. And remember, cite specific studies from the intro. You don't have to go spending hours searching for more research. It should all be in your intro. If you did your work in the intro, your work in the discussion should be a lot easier. Big picture question. What has your study contributed to the line of inquiry? It's a weird way to phrase it, but what has your study contributed to prior research, right? How have you extended prior research? How is your study different? So this is, if we had more time, I would have you go in your groups, but here's a key discussion question to think about before you start writing your discussion. How do your studies relate to key background studies? So think about it. How do the results of your studies either compare or either similar or not similar to other studies? Any questions about connecting to previous literature? Once again, I highly suggest you go read example papers, the 2 example papers on eCampus. See how they did it. One did it in a very lengthy way and another did it in a very short way. Both are perfectly acceptable. So are there any questions so far about connecting to previous literature? Okay. Limitations of current research. So this can be a little hard, but every one of your studies has some sort of flaw. You know, no study is perfect. You know, even real studies that get published in journals, no study is perfect. And hopefully you saw that while reading research. Every study has a limitation section. Now, I want to see you go beyond, hey, we had a majority females and maybe our sample size isn't large. I don't want to see that. Or maybe you can have that as one, but that's not all of your limitations. I really want to see, maybe your design was slightly flawed. Maybe, if you have a manipulation check, run some analyses on a manipulation check. And once again, come see me. I can talk about, if you have a manipulation check, what we should be looking at, but maybe you didn't induce stress. Maybe your condition wasn't really that stressful. So that could be a limitation. Maybe if you had a significant result, there's still limitations. How do they color your conclusions, quote unquote color? How do they muddle your conclusions? Maybe and I'd have to think about it with you as a group, looking at your individual study. I can't just come off it with the top of my head, but we can talk about some of the limitations if you can't think of any yourself. So this is another question to think about. What are some limitations in your study? Finally, you should have a future direction section. What are the specific next steps in your line of research? So what are you actually looking at? Are you looking at how social media influences well-being? Are you looking at how race impacts housing prices? Think about the limitations that you came up with and how to improve upon that. I don't need you to necessarily design an entirely new study, right? But talk about how would you address some of your limitations? Think about the big picture. Think about what your results showed or maybe didn't show, and think about how you could take your results and move on with them. What would you want to, what type of questions do you have after finding out your results? I'm sure a lot of your results probably created some more questions. You're like, well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? That's something you can talk about in future directions. All right. I went over this part really, really fast, but in the remaining 3 minutes, I really do want to bring up or show, some of these sample papers. So there's 2 sample papers, and I really want to show you that, there are 2 different types of lengths. So, discussion starts here. So it's essentially, let's just say it starts here. The first paragraph, see how they structured the first paragraph, and hopefully maybe you try to structure your first paragraph very similarly. Remember, they just said, hey, here's what we tested. The results of the study did not support the hypothesis, and they were found not to be significant, meaning that this did not affect that. What is that, like 2 sentences, right? 2-3 sentences maybe? Then they have a paragraph connecting to previous literature, and it's just, that's not even half a page, right? So don't get too stressed out about this, but look at how this person did it, and see if you can incorporate their flow and their style of writing, and what did they talk about, and try to incorporate that into your own study. Sample paper number 1 took a slightly different approach. They have a slightly bigger, first paragraph. And they have a couple paragraphs. All of this is looking at prior research. So I believe they didn't even find significant results, right? Yeah, so they found not significant results. So it probably goes against a lot of their intro research. But yet they still managed to get, a solid 2 pages of incorporating their research into others. So, I can't sit here and tell you a general rule of how long it should be or how to necessarily do it because I don't know your individual studies. I can do this more one-on-one, and help people if you're struggling coming up with ideas. But you can see here's 2 examples, one on the extreme end of length and one on the other extreme end of length of relatively short. Both of them would probably get an A. Well, I know this one would definitely get an A. I believe the other one would get an A as well. And you can see how, what limitations they talked about. And the implications of future directions. Anyways, 2 extreme example, well, not extreme, I guess, because the other one is perfectly fine as well. But lengthwise, 2 extreme examples, both are decent. Look at them, try to get some ideas. Please, please, please come see me if you have any questions. I would be more than happy to work with you for as long as you need. I'd rather work with you, in over Zoom than have to take off points, on a draft or the final paper. I will be here. So we're out of time. I will be here for the next however long you need. So if anyone wants to stay to talk about results or anything, you can stay. But other than that, I will see you next Thursday.